People said the mall was for everyone. Families came to laugh, eat, shop, and make memories under banners that promised community values, timeless traditions. But when Darius Reed stepped through those glass doors on a calm Saturday morning, it didn't feel like everyone included him. It felt like the walls were watching, like the air itself tensed when he walked by. He wasn't loud, wasn't flashy. Hoodie, jeans, sneakers. The same look worn by half the teenagers milling around the food court. But Darius wasn't there for pretzels or sneakers. He was there with purpose, a silent observer, eyeing empty storefronts, foot, traffic, and spaces for potential. The mall was quietly dying. He was quietly thinking of buying it, but nobody looking at him saw an investor. They saw what they expected to see. A woman near the pretzel stand hugged her purse a little tighter as he passed. A security guard shifted his stance and tracked Darius like a shadow. And 2 stores down, a woman with a coffee cup lifted her phone, pretending to text, but her camera was pointed right at him. He didn't notice at first. His mind was on lease prices, not eyes watching him. But a sudden stillness in the air made him pause, and when he caught the glint of her phone in a nearby store window, he knew. She was filming him, for simply being there. He had seen this story play out. For others, for himself. That strange quiet in the crowd, the suspicion, the weight of proving your innocence without being accused. He turned to a directory, pretending to search for a store. In the glass reflection, the woman's phone stayed steady. A man leaned in to whisper something to her, and she laughed, low and sharp. Not kind. Darius looked into the glass again, straight into her lens. He didn't flinch, just offered a small smile, not wide, not angry. Just enough to say, "I see you." Her hand dipped, but she didn't stop watching him, didn't apologize. She just stiffened, as if waiting for something to go wrong. He moved on slowly, heart ticking louder now. He had the kind of resume that looked good on magazine covers. Tech investor, real estate developer, former foster kid who made it out, made it big, and stayed quiet. He could have been on stage at a conference, but here, he was just another threat in a hoodie. As he passed the food court, he caught sight of a little black boy pointing to a toy stand. His mother knelt beside him, smoothing his hair with a tenderness that made Darius pause. That boy had no idea what the world would one day make of his presence. He didn't know how suspicion could be louder than words. Darius walked on, paused at a vacant store. For lease in big bold letters, empty shelves, dust in the corners. It was perfect. He reached for his phone to snap a picture, but then came the voice. "Excuse me, sir, can I help you with something?" He turned. A security guard stood nearby. Mid-50s, white, hands on belt. "I'm good, thanks." "You've been here a while," the guard said. "Store owners are a little uncomfortable. Mind telling me what you're doing?" It wasn't loud, but it was public. People glanced. Darius felt it, the slow shift of attention, the growing bubble of eyes and judgment. "Just browsing," he said calmly. "That a problem?" "Not if you're actually browsing," came the reply. "Mind showing some ID?" Darius paused. "For walking in a mall?" "Standard procedure," the guard said, voice flat. "We had a report." Darius could feel it now. The woman, the phone, the looks, all of it leading here. He handed over his ID, jaw tight. The guard studied it like he was looking for a lie. After a long moment, he handed it back. "Just don't linger in one spot too long." No apology. No explanation. Just instructions to exist faster. Darius didn't respond. He walked. Toward the exit this time. Behind him the murmurs started, a few stares, a few smirks, but the woman with the phone, she was gone. Her video didn't need her anymore. It had done what she wanted. Made a man feel small, erased his story, twisted his presence into a problem. But as the doors slid open and he stepped outside, Darius didn't feel shame. He felt fire. Not the kind that rages, the kind that builds. They saw a stranger, he saw a system, and he wasn't going to burn it down. He was going to own it. It started with footsteps. At first Darius thought he was imagining it. The subtle shift in rhythm behind him, a pattern too steady to be casual, but as he walked past a second closed store, the echo stayed with him. Same pace, same distance. He slowed, letting a group of teenagers pass in front of him, then turned into a side corridor with a few shuttered shops. In the reflection of the glass, he caught the figure clearly this time. Security. Not the same guard as before. This one was younger, maybe early 30s, heavy-set with a buzz cut and a walk that said, he wasn't just patrolling, he was trailing. Darius tried to ignore it. He didn't want to assume, but in America, a black man walking alone didn't have to assume for long. The world usually confirmed it for him. He turned back into the main corridor, heading toward the escalators. Just as he stepped onto the moving steps, he heard it. "Hey, excuse me, sir." The voice was sharp, loud enough to turn heads. Darius turned slowly. "Yeah?" "You've been circling the second level for a while," the guard said, climbing a few steps to meet him halfway. "Just wondering what you're looking for." "I wasn't aware walking in a mall required a reason," Darius replied, calm but firm. The guard smirked. "You're not carrying any shopping bags, not looking at anything specific, just wandering makes people nervous." Darius's stomach dropped, but his face stayed composed. "I'm observing. I'm in commercial real estate, looking at foot traffic, lease potential." The guard raised an eyebrow like he'd heard a joke. "You have a business card?" Darius didn't flinch. He reached into his wallet and pulled one out, handing it over. The man turned it over slowly as if trying to prove it was fake. The small crowd gathering near the railing wasn't even subtle anymore. Eyes watching, phones quietly raised. A woman stepped forward from the side. It was her, the one from earlier. The coffee cup was gone, but her phone wasn't. "I have footage," she said, directing her voice to the guard. He was walking back and forth in front of stores like he was scoping them out. He looked off. Darius turned to her, eyes heavy with disbelief. "What exactly did I do in your video?" She hesitated. "I'm just saying, I recorded him in case something happened." The guard's stance shifted. "Okay, sir, I'm gonna need you to come with me." "For what?" Darius asked, louder this time. "What crime am I being accused of?" "Just come with me. Let's talk somewhere private." "No," Darius replied. "If you're accusing me of something, say it here, right now." People had stopped walking. Kids were tugging at their parents. Store employees leaned against their doorways. The mall, once buzzing, had fallen quiet in the way only public tension can. A pressure in the air. A storm waiting to burst. "I'm not resisting," Darius said, hands raised slightly. "But I'm not going to be dragged into some back room just because I made someone uncomfortable." The guard didn't wait. He reached for Darius's arm. "Don't touch me," Darius snapped, stepping back, and in that instant, someone's phone flashed. Another camera clicked on, another angle, another headline waiting to be written. The guard stepped closer. "Stop making a scene." "I'm not," Darius said. "You are." But the crowd didn't see two sides. They saw a tall black man and a white security officer. They saw tension. They saw threat. And no matter how calm Darius tried to stay, it was already too late. The guard grabbed his elbow. Darius jerked away, not a strike, not aggression, just instinct. But it was enough. Another hand came from behind. Another guard now, and together they wrestled Darius's arms behind his back. "What are you doing?" Darius barked. "I didn't do anything," voices murmured. Cameras filmed. Someone gasped. A child cried. Just like that, Darius was shoved through the crowd, down the hall and out of the mall's main doors. He didn't fight. He didn't yell. But his eyes burned. When the doors shut behind him, he stood in the parking lot, stunned, breathing heavy, heart pounding. He checked his phone. No calls, no missed messages, just a notification. "You've been tagged in a video." His thumb hovered over the notification. He already knew what it was. Already felt the weight of it before. Tapping. But when he opened the video and saw the thumbnail, his face caught mid-sentence, mouth open, hand raised slightly as he tried to explain himself. His chest tightened. The caption read, "Suspicious man causes disturbance at mall. Name, Watch what happens. 20 seconds long, posted just 5 minutes ago. Already over 3,000 views. He hit play. It was edited, of course. Cropped right at the moment the guard grabbed his arm. No lead-up, no explanation. Just a shaky video of a black man pulling. Wave from security, voice raised, face stern. No one would know what came before, no one would care. The comments were already rolling in. Typical behavior. Why is it always the same story? Play stupid games. Look at how aggressive he gets. You can tell something's off. And then, a few different ones. This is disgusting. He wasn't doing anything. Why are people filming strangers like this? Just because he's black? But the damage had already settled like dust in his lungs. It wasn't just about what people were saying. It was how quickly they said it, how fast strangers could decide what he was, and what he wasn't, based on 20 seconds of silence, edits, and fear. Darius didn't move for a while. Just stood in the parking lot surrounded by cars and clouds and the weight of too many stories that looked just like his. He was successful, clean record, degrees, property. But none of that stopped a phone camera from turning him into a headline. Cautionary tale. He got in his car. Drove with the kind of focus that didn't come from peace but from pressure. No music, no calls. Just the hum of the engine and the spinning of thoughts. When he stepped into his penthouse, it felt colder than usual. Quiet. Too quiet. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the Atlanta skyline, glowing in gold and haze. His walls were decorated with minimalist artwork and subtle elegance. On one shelf sat a collection of framed articles. From foster care to Fortune 500, the quiet rise of Darius Reed, how one man reclaimed his future. He stared at them now bitterly. What did it matter? He had done everything right. Played the game, stayed under the radar, let his success speak for him, but still, when a white woman held up her phone, the world listened to her version of events, not his. Still, a guard saw a problem instead of a person. He dropped his keys on the counter, poured a glass of water with shaky hands, sat on the edge of his leather couch like the air had been knocked out of him. His phone lit up again. This time it was a group chat. Old friends from college, business partners, a few industry contacts. Hey man, you good? You trending. Don't worry, this'll blow over. You should get ahead of it, post a statement. A statement? He didn't even get to speak his truth in person. Why would the internet want to hear it now? He placed the phone face down on the table and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. His fingers interlaced tightly, pressing against his lips. He wasn't hurt physically. Not bruised, not broken, but something inside him cracked. Not because this had never happened before, but because it kept happening. And every time, it chipped away at the belief that maybe, just maybe, he was finally free of it. He closed his eyes and thought about the boy he saw at the food court. Innocent, unaware. Would he grow up and become a man the world feared for no reason? Would he be followed too? Would his truth get cut down to 20 seconds of someone else's version? Darius stood up slowly, walked over to the window, and stared out at the city that had built him up, and now seemed ready to pull him back down. He had the kind of power most kids in his old neighborhood never dreamed of. He could buy buildings, change contracts, set the rules. But today, none of that saved him. And yet, somewhere beneath the ache and anger, he felt something shift. This couldn't be the end of the story. He wouldn't let it. The hours passed slowly, stretching into a gray blur of silence and thought. Darius sat in the same spot on his couch long after the sun dipped below the skyline, casting his penthouse into a soft, lonely dusk. No music played, no screens flickered. The world outside sparkled with movement and life. But inside, Darius was still, numb. His phone buzzed occasionally. Texts from colleagues, headlines from gossip blogs, DMs from people he hadn't spoken to in years. Most messages blurred together. I saw the video. Hope you're okay. Man, this is crazy. He didn't answer any of them. He leaned back and closed his eyes, and that's when the memories came. Not by choice, but by instinct. His mind didn't go to last week's meetings or next quarter's goals. It went backwards. Years back, he was 16 again, walking out of a corner store near his high school. It was late, and he had just picked up some snacks before heading home. The bag of chips hadn't even made it to his backpack when flashing lights bathed the sidewalk in red and blue. The officer never asked if he had a receipt. He asked why a kid like him was out at that hour, said the store had been robbed the week before, and Darius fit the general description. Darius remembered the way the plastic bag slipped from his hand, how the soda can burst open on the ground, fizzing and rolling down the curb. He remembered the way people stared as the officer patted him down in public. Another time, 21 years old, he was driving his first used luxury car, a beat-up silver Mercedes he'd saved for 2 years to afford. He was pulled over 3 times in the first month. Once for a broken tail light that wasn't broken. Another for going too slow in a neighborhood he didn't live in. The third time, the officer asked how he could afford the car. No citation, no warning. Just a cold gaze that said, "You don't belong here." He did everything his mother taught him. Keep your hands visible. Speak clearly. Don't run your mouth. Smile when necessary, but not too much. Never wear a hoodie at night. Never argue. Survive. He had followed every unspoken rule, bent over backwards to make people feel comfortable with his presence. And still, it never mattered. One step out of line, one wrong look, one edited video, and the world forgot his name, forgot his story. Just another black man causing trouble. Darius opened his eyes and stared at the ceiling. His throat burned with unsaid words. Not the loud kind, not rage. It was a quiet, sinking ache, the kind that made him wonder if it was even worth any more. What was the point of building something they could tear down with a single headline? He walked slowly into his home office, dimly lit by the glow of the city. The bookshelves were lined with titles on architecture, business, strategy. His degrees hung neatly on the wall beside photos of ribbon cuttings and property launches. A glass award engraved with Visionary Developer of the Year sat on a polished oak desk. He stood in front of it, staring. Was all this just armor? Had he wrapped his success around himself like a shield, hoping it would make him immune? He sighed and reached for his laptop. The screen blinked to life, and before he could talk himself out of it, he opened a browser and typed in the words, "Black man arrested mall video." The results poured in. Dozens of links. Different cities. Different names. Same story. He clicked on one. A man tackled for sitting too long on a bench. Another confronted for talking loudly on his phone. A teenager handcuffed for looking nervous. Each video had the same thread in the comments. Why didn't he just comply? Maybe if he dressed differently. I'm sure there's more to the story. Stop making everything about race. He closed the laptop. It wasn't just what had happened to him. It was the way the world responded. The coldness. The doubt. The instinct to justify it all rather than question why it keeps happening. It was as if the truth needed to pass a test to be heard. His hand trembled slightly as he picked up his phone again, scrolling without purpose, when suddenly the screen lit up with a name that made him pause. Aunt Laverne. He hesitated for a moment, then answered. Her voice filled the quiet like warm tea on a cold day. "Baby, you all right?" He didn't speak at first. The silence said enough. "I saw what they did to you," she continued softly. "Watched the whole thing on the news. Twice." He let out a slow breath. "I didn't do anything, Auntie." "I know," she said. "You never do. But they don't always need a reason." He lowered his head. She didn't scold him, didn't push him to explain. She knew better than most. She had taught for 38 years in underfunded schools, raised 3 kids on her own, and helped Darius navigate a world that looked at him like a walking threat long before he learned to tie a tie. "You listen to me," she said, her voice firmer now. "Don't you let their ignorance define your power, you hear me?" "I don't know what to do," he whispered. "If I speak up, I become a target. If I stay quiet, I become invisible. Either way, I lose." "You don't have to yell," she replied. "You just have to stand." You were born to build, not burn. Don't forget that. Don't let them trick you into shrinking. Tears welled up in his eyes before he could stop them. I'm tired, he said, his voice breaking. Tired of proving I belong. You've got nothing left to prove, she said gently. Now it's about what you choose to do with what you already are. They sat in silence for a few moments, connected by breath and blood, and a truth that didn't need explaining. You've come too far, she added, voice low but steady. Don't let them drag you back to a place you already escaped from. He nodded, even though she couldn't see it. I love you, Auntie. I love you more. As the call ended, Darius sat back, the weight still heavy, but somehow different. He wasn't okay. Not yet, but the crack in his chest didn't feel hollow anymore. It felt like a door, one waiting to be opened. The night deepened, but sleep never came. Darius sat alone by the window, watching the city flicker beneath him. Cars moved in lines like veins carrying blood across the city's surface. Unaware of the storm quietly building inside one man, many stories above. His reflection in the glass looked calm, but it didn't feel that way inside. The longer he sat, the more everything started to unravel. The silence in that mall, the coldness in those eyes, the way even now, hours later, the sting hadn't dulled. His mind kept replaying that woman's voice. He looked off. What did that mean? What had he done? Walk too slowly? Look too long? Breathe wrong? It was the same coded language that always got men like him in trouble. Suspicious, aggressive, unstable. Words that masked fear with a thin veil of concern. Words that excused injustice before anyone had to feel uncomfortable calling it what it really was. He stood from the chair and began pacing slowly. The wood floors creaked beneath his steps, each one dragging the weight of 1,000 moments like this one. Not just his, but the stories of others. He thought about Trayvon Martin, about Christian, Cooper in the park, about the countless names that trended for a few days before becoming hashtags people barely remembered. He'd read the articles, seen the outrage, watched the vigils, but it was different when you were the story. When it was your name dancing across group chats, your face in a blurry video, your truth being picked apart by people who never bothered to understand. Part of him wanted to disappear. Shut off his phone. Let the news cycle move on without him. He had money, connections. He could fly somewhere, vanish for a while, and return when things calmed down. He could bury this like he'd buried every other moment that made him feel small. But another part, the part that had clawed its way from foster care to Forbes, refused to sit quietly this time. He opened his laptop again, but not to check the news. This time, he opened a folder he hadn't touched in months. Inside were documents, plans, notes, everything he'd been gathering on potential commercial investments. One of the tabs was labeled Midtown Plaza Viability Review. It was the mall. He stared at it for a long while. He remembered what his aunt said. You were born to build, not burn. That meant something different now. It didn't mean play safe. It meant build so well, so boldly, that no one could deny your presence even if they tried to erase it. Meant reclaiming space in a world that always found ways to shut doors quietly in your face. He picked up his phone and called Jalen, his most trusted analyst. Yo. Jalen answered groggily, clearly caught off guard by the late hour. You good? I'm ready, Darius said. Ready for what? To buy it. There was silence on the other end. You mean the mall? Jalen finally asked. I want everything on it by morning. Financials, leasing data, ownership structure, discreetly. And I want you to put together a team that understands why this matters. Not just a good deal, a necessary one. You serious? As a heart attack, Darius said, his voice steady now. Jalen didn't ask questions. He knew better. Consider it done. As the call ended, Darius looked around his apartment again. The awards on the wall weren't what made him who he was. The business cards, the headlines, the titles, they were proof he could play their game. But this time he was going to change the board. He walked back to the window, arms crossed, breath steadying. The city didn't feel so cold now. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was waiting for him to step into what he was meant to do, not to react, but to rebuild. And this time the story wouldn't be 20 seconds long. It would be permanent. Let me know when you're ready to continue into the next section. Resistance and support, a spark of change. 3 days passed before Darius heard from her. He was sitting at the breakfast counter in his kitchen, half-eaten toast on his plate, scrolling through news that had already moved on to the next trending. Outrage. The video of his mall incident had slipped from the spotlight, replaced by celebrity scandals, political arguments, and viral dances. The world had turned the page. But Darius hadn't, he couldn't. Then came the message. Simple, direct. Hi, my name is Leah. I manage one of the small businesses in Midtown Plaza. I saw what happened to you. If you're open to talking, I have something you need to hear. He stared at the message for a full minute before responding. Let's talk. They met at a quiet coffee shop outside the city. Far enough from the mall, from cameras, from anyone who might recognize either of them. Leah Nguyen was in her early 30s, soft-spoken but sharp-eyed. She wore her exhaustion like armor, polished, and contained but heavy. I manage the bookstore next to the old shoe shop, she began, stirring her coffee without sipping it. You walked by my storefront 3 times that morning. I saw you. He nodded slowly. And? You were just walking, looking, maybe thinking, that's all. But I saw her filming you. I saw the guards follow you. I've seen it happen before. Darius tilted his head. To who? To anyone who doesn't fit their idea of safe, she replied. Black customers, Hispanic teenagers, even my husband once when he waited for me after closing. He's Korean. They asked if he was loitering. Darius listened without interrupting. I've tried to bring it up before, Leah continued. When the last incident happened, I filed a complaint with the mall office. Their response, they said if I wanted to keep my lease, I should focus on selling books, not making noise. Darius looked down for a moment, his fingers tapping the side of his cup. They don't know I was there, Leah added. I haven't said anything publicly, but if you need someone to back you up, I will. He met her gaze. Why risk it? He asked. They could still come after your business. I've already lost sleep over that place, she said, finally taking a sip of her drink. I'm tired of being silent just to keep a shelf open. You being dragged out like that, it did something to me. It reminded me how fragile it all is, how easy it is to feel powerless. There was something raw in her voice. Not pity, not guilt, just recognition. Darius nodded slowly, his voice quieter now. Thank you. That night he didn't sleep either, but not from rage, from strategy. He pulled out old documents, spreadsheets, ownership data, investment threads he'd been watching quietly for months. Midtown Plaza was struggling. The management company had fallen behind on repairs. Tenants were turning over fast. Rumors had circulated for a while that they were looking to sell the property, but nothing had hit the public market. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. Darius made a few calls. A friend in acquisitions, a broker in Buckhead, a banker he trusted. Then he called someone he hadn't spoken to in over a year, Mr. Jacob Ellis, a retired real estate attorney who had once taught him everything he knew about land transfers and legal loopholes. Jacob, Darius said over the phone. I need your eyes on something, Jacob chuckled. You always come calling when there's a war coming. Not a war, Darius replied. A correction. In the days that followed, he assembled a team. Young, hungry, brilliant minds who understood the stakes. Not just financial, but personal. A black woman with a background in zoning. A Haitian-American developer with a gift for community planning. A queer Latina accountant who knew how to trace every dollar in a deal with surgical precision. None of them were picked for show. They were there because they were the best. And because they knew what it meant to be told, over and over again, that you didn't belong. They worked in silence, emails encrypted, meetings off-site, everything discreet. He didn't want to make noise. He wanted to make history. The plan unfolded, slowly, almost too quietly. Darius made sure of that. Every paper signed, every call placed, every inspection ordered. It all moved beneath the surface, like the current of a deep river. There was no press release, no Instagram post. Just purposeful steps, one after another, leading towards something much bigger than retaliation. During the day, he reviewed floor plans and rent histories. At night, he mapped out how a space like Midtown Plaza could be reimagined, not just as a mall, but as a reflection of a community that had been pushed to the margins for far too long. He wasn't just thinking about buying the property. He was thinking about reshaping the narrative. But as the days passed, he also knew the public had moved on. The buzz around the video had faded into the background noise of the internet. People who had posted their outrage had already turned to the next story. That bothered him more than he expected. It wasn't just that he had been humiliated. It was that it had become so easy for people to watch it, judge it, and forget it. That forgetfulness was a kind of violence too, so Darius went back. This time, he parked in the far lot, stepped out of his car in a fitted blazer and slacks, and walked through the front doors of the mall not as a suspect, but as a man reclaiming his presence. He kept his steps measured, calm, not looking over his shoulder, not tensing when someone passed him, just walking, simply walking. But every step echoed with more weight than before. He passed the same fountain where he had once stood under surveillance, past the same pretzel stand where the woman had clutched her bag and whispered into her phone, past the store where Leah had watched silently from the shadows. This time, no one followed him, but he noticed things others missed. A teenage boy, maybe 15, with skin just a few shades darker than Darius's, was being asked questions by a mall employee for standing too long near the entrance of a shoe store. The boy looked confused, holding nothing but a backpack. No friends, no noise, just standing. Darius stopped nearby, leaned against the railing, and watched quietly. The boy saw him, eyes wide with fear and shame. Darius gave him a small nod, just enough to say, "I see you." The employee eventually backed off, muttering something under his breath before walking away. Darius approached slowly. "You good?" he asked. The boy nodded, embarrassed. "You sure?" He shrugged. "Yeah, happens." That answer sat with Darius long after the boy walked off. Happens. Like it was normal. Like it was something to be expected. Like his presence, just like Darius's, had been, was always under review. He continued walking, more observant now. He saw it in the way certain shoppers got quicker service, in the way some workers tensed when someone black or brown asked a question. It wasn't always loud. It wasn't always filmed. But it was always there. By the time he left the mall, the sun had begun to set, casting long shadows across the parking. He stood for a moment, hands in his pockets, breathing in the evening air. He had seen enough. When he got home that night, he opened a file labeled Phase 2 and began drafting what the mall could become under new ownership. He thought of Leah. He thought of that boy. He thought of his younger self being pulled over in a car he could barely afford just for existing. This wasn't just about reclaiming dignity. It was about building something that told people like him, "You deserve to be here. Not in a back room, not under watch, not as a maybe or a maybe not, but as a full rightful presence." And this time they wouldn't see him coming until it was too late to stop him. It began with a signature. Months of silence, months of planning, phone calls, background checks, and carefully worded contracts, all leading to this moment. The conference room was cold and minimal, just like every other boardroom Darius had ever sat in, except this time, he wasn't the one being pitched to. He was the one making the offer. And now, it had been accepted. The executives of the mall's parent company sat stiffly across the table, eyes glancing between the final paperwork and the diverse team of professionals sitting beside Darius. Lawyers, analysts, consultants. Them quiet, all of them focused. The final number had been enough. The company, struggling to stay afloat, hadn't even questioned who was behind the purchase. They saw capital, stability, an exit strategy. They didn't see the man they had, once dismissed in a security report. They didn't recognize the incident from a few months ago as anything more than a PR headache long forgotten. When Darius stood and extended his hand to seal the deal, his voice was steady. "We're ready to begin the transition. Expect a statement by morning." The handshake was brief, polite, hollow. They had no idea what was coming. The press conference was held 2 weeks later. There was a small crowd gathered near the mall entrance. Reporters, community members, curious shoppers. A podium stood near the fountain where it had all begun, with a banner draped above reading, "A New Chapter for Midtown Plaza." Darius stood behind the podium, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit. Not flashy, just clean, confident, and rooted. He looked over the crowd for a moment, letting the quiet settle before speaking. "Some of you may know me. Most of you probably don't. My name is Darius Reed. I'm a developer, investor, and proud son of this city. And as of this month, I'm also the new owner of Midtown Plaza." The cameras clicked. The reporters leaned forward. "I didn't come here today to talk about profits or percentages," he continued. "I came to talk about people, about what this place means and what it can become." He paused, eyes moving across the faces in the crowd. Somewhere near the back, he caught sight of Leah, her arms crossed, lips pressed tight. She gave a small nod. That was enough. "A few months ago, I walked through these doors dressed like anyone else, casual, observing, thinking. And I was followed, confronted, filmed. Not because I was causing harm, but because of how I looked. Because I didn't fit someone's idea of who belonged." Murmurs moved through the crowd. Some lowered their heads. Others looked toward the cameras, waiting for a reaction. "That moment was recorded," he said. "It spread online. Some defended me. Others questioned me, but the truth is, this isn't just my story. It's a reflection of something bigger. Something we all see, but not enough of us change." He let the silence linger, let it land where it needed to. "But I didn't come here today for revenge. I didn't buy this place to make a point. I bought it to make a difference." Whispers turned to stillness. People leaned in. "This mall will be undergoing a full renovation over the next year. Not just the walls and ceilings, but the systems, the policies, and the way it operates. We're implementing mandatory inclusion training for every employee and contractor. We're updating tenant policies to create space for minority-owned businesses, many of whom were previously priced out or denied access." A few claps broke the silence. "We'll be launching a mentorship program that partners with local schools and entrepreneurs, giving young Black, brown, and underrepresented voices a place to grow, to be seen, to belong." More applause now, genuine, growing. "We won't erase what happened here, but we will build something stronger on top of it." As the cameras continued flashing, Darius stepped back from the mic. The statement had been made, but the shift, the real shift, was just beginning. The video of Darius's speech spread faster than the one that once tried to destroy him. This time, the angle was different. His voice wasn't raised. His hands weren't held up in defense. He stood behind a podium, composed, commanding, not demanding respect, but making people feel the weight of his presence simply by being there. And somewhere, in the quiet of her home, the woman who had once lifted her phone in suspicion sat frozen on her couch, her coffee growing cold in her hand. She didn't need the caption to tell her who he was. Her face flushed as the clip played. Her eyes flickered with the recognition she could no longer pretend not to feel. "That's the man. That's the man I filmed." The comments were different this time. "This is the kind of story we need more of. From humiliation to ownership. Powerful. She filmed him for existing. He bought the place she shops in. That's poetry. Let this be a lesson. Watch who you try to silence." She looked down at her phone. The old video still lived in her feed, the one that had gone viral for all the wrong reasons. People had stopped talking about it, but now it was being dragged back into the light, and this time, the context was complete. She scrolled through the new posts, pictures of the remodeled mall, headlines calling Darius a visionary. tweets highlighting how quiet dignity had overpowered loud ignorance. No one tagged her, but the memory didn't need a username to haunt her now. And across town, in a break room tucked behind the newly renovated food court, the security guard who had grabbed Darius's arm all those months ago sat at a table, slowly peeling back the lid of his lunch container. He'd seen the press conference, heard the announcement. He hadn't said anything to the other guards, but the moment he saw Darius standing at that podium, he felt his chest cave inward. He didn't expect what came next. That afternoon, Darius walked through the back corridors of the mall during a routine check-in with new staff. He moved calmly, speaking with managers, nodding to employees, listening more than he spoke. And then he saw him. The security guard paused mid-step, unsure whether to approach or walk away. But Darius made the choice for him. He stopped, looked the man in the eye, and offered a small nod. The guard cleared his throat, nervous now in a way he hadn't been before. "Mr. Reed," he said softly. Darius raised an eyebrow. "Yes? I didn't know who you were back then." I know," Darius interrupted gently. "You saw what you were trained to see." The guard shifted awkwardly. "I shouldn't have handled it that way. I should have listened." Darius held his gaze. "But you didn't." There was silence between them. The kind that makes men feel small, not because they've been yelled at, but because they've finally been seen clearly. "I've started the new training," the guard said. "I'm learning, trying." "I hope you are," Darius replied. The man looked down, then back up. "I don't expect forgiveness." "I'm not here for apologies," Darius said, voice even. "I'm here for change." He nodded once, and that was it. No speech, no lecture. Just truth. The kind that sinks deeper than any punishment. Darius turned and walked on, his steps steady, his back straight. Behind him the guard stood still, humbled, quiet, and aware that something had shifted inside him that couldn't be undone. Time changed everything. The mall that once echoed with suspicion now breathed with new life. The tiled floors were redone, polished but warm, welcoming. Colorful murals replaced old banners, each one telling a different story. Stories of culture, history, struggle, and pride. Where dull storefronts once stood empty, new businesses bloomed. There was a soul in the walls now, not just merchandise. Word spread fast. Local artists were invited to showcase their work. Black and brown business owners finally had affordable space to grow. A father opened a soul food cafe near the food court. A young Somali woman launched a fashion boutique in a corner space that used to be a clearance shoe outlet. The energy shifted. Not all at once, but steadily, tangibly. What used to be a place people visited and hurried through became a place they stayed. A documentary crew showed up just weeks after the press conference. They had seen clips online, heard whispers about what had happened. But it wasn't the viral video that brought them. It was what came after. They interviewed Leah about the pushback she'd faced. They interviewed teenagers from the local school who said they finally felt seen. And they sat down with Darius, who spoke less about himself and more about what this transformation meant. "It's not just about a mall," he told them. "It's about reminding people that spaces like this belong to all of us. That dignity doesn't have a dress code. That presence isn't a threat." Major news outlets began to pick it up. "A master class in grace and power," one headline read. "From profiled to proprietor," said another. But while the world marveled, the community bloomed. Teenagers who had once been followed now volunteered at mentorship programs inside the new youth center, built in what used to be an old arcade. Mothers who had kept their heads down while shopping now walked with ease, greeting store owners by name. Even mall security, retrained and diversified, began showing up not with suspicion but with support. A young boy stood at the entrance one Saturday afternoon, staring up at the new signage that read, "Midtown Commons, where community comes first." His mother squeezed his hand, smiled, and said, "See that name on the wall? That's the man who owns this place now." The boy blinked. "He looks like me," she nodded. "Exactly." The change wasn't just cosmetic, It was structural, emotional, cultural. And it didn't just affect the people walking through those doors. It rippled through a city that had once shrugged off the quiet violence of being watched, doubted, and erased. Later that week, Darius found himself driving through the old neighborhood, where streets had cracks, porches leaned, and memories still clung to the corners like vines. It had been a while since he made the trip, not because he didn't care, but because life had pulled him so far in so many directions, and somewhere along the line, he'd started measuring time by contracts and deadlines. But this time was different. He wasn't coming back as a kid with dreams too big for his zip code. He was coming home with something to show for it. When he pulled into the driveway of the little brick house with the crooked mailbox and wind chimes on the porch, he saw her silhouette through the front window. Aunt Laverne, her shoulders a little more hunched than he remembered. Her hands still folded around a paperback novel like she had paused on purpose, waiting for him before finishing the chapter. She opened the door before he could knock, her face lighting up in that way that only love untouched by time can do. "Boy, you took long enough," she said, pulling him in with a hug that wrapped around every piece of him. "I brought something," he smiled. "I already got what I need," she replied, patting his chest. "You?" They sat in her kitchen, the same worn table between them, same floral tablecloth, same ceramic teapot she refused to replace. "I saw you on TV," she said after a long pause, her voice warm and proud. "The way you stood up there. Lord have mercy." He didn't say much, just listened. "You didn't raise your voice," she continued. "You didn't fight fire with fire. You didn't burn it down, baby. You bought it back and you made it better." His throat tightened. All those nights he had paced in silence, doubting himself. All those moments when anger nearly took the wheel, it all melted under her words. "I just wanted people to feel safe walking in," he said quietly, "to feel seen." "They do now," she replied. "Because of you." She reached for his hand, and he let her hold it, grounding him in the simplicity of love that expected nothing more than the truth. Later that night, back in his apartment, Darius sat at his desk with the lights dimmed low and the city stretched wide beneath him. The buzz had slowed. The media had done its cycle. But something inside him knew it wasn't finished. Not until he spoke. Not for the cameras, not for the news, but for himself. He opened a blank document, and he wrote, "They saw a threat. I saw potential." Sometimes the best response isn't shouting, it's building. Quietly, steadily, until the foundation is so strong they can't shake it. Until you become the thing they said you'd never be. Until your presence doesn't ask for permission, it just exists. Proud, permanent, enough. He didn't hit post right away, just sat with it. Then without fanfare, he clicked publish. The Cox. Blog spread slowly at first, then like a flame catching wind. People quoted it, teachers read it aloud in classrooms. Activists shared it in meetings. Parents taped it to refrigerators. Not because it was loud, but because it echoed. And far below his apartment window, the mall glowed in the distance. Full. Alive. Changed. Not everyone knew the full story. But those who did felt something shift in the air. A reminder that dignity doesn't come from what you say after you're hurt. It comes from what you choose to build after they tried to break you. And Darius had built something no one could tear. The seasons changed, but the story remained. What had begun as humiliation inside a suburban shopping mall had transformed into a symbol that stretched far beyond square footage. Midtown Commons was no longer just a place to buy shoes or grab coffee. It was a place where people found a reflection of themselves in ownership, in opportunity, in respect. Black teenagers walked its halls without fear of being followed. Women in hijabs browsed freely. Elderly men greeted young vendors with pride. Something sacred had been returned. To the people, a sense of belonging. Darius never became the face of a movement. He didn't want to. He never chased a spotlight, never looked for applause. He let the walls speak. He let the lights stay on. He let the space breathe for those who had once been told, in so many ways, "You don't belong here." And yet, his name, became something whispered with respect. At community dinners, he was the quiet chair at the end of the table, listening more than he spoke. At local schools, students referenced his story in essays about leadership. His blog post had been printed and framed in storefront windows. His quiet resistance, his refusal to let anger rot into bitterness, became a blueprint. He didn't erase what happened to him. He built on it. Not every face in the crowd had changed. Some people still whispered. Some still crossed the street when they saw a hoodie. But the difference was undeniable. Where there had once been silence, there was now accountability. Where there had been exclusion, there was access. Where there had been shame, there was dignity. On the anniversary of the day he was escorted out, Darius returned to the mall once more, not to speak, not to perform, but to observe. He sat alone on a bench, unnoticed, watching a father and daughter laugh over smoothies. A group of teenage boys leaned against a rail, joking about sneakers and music. A young couple took a selfie beneath the new mural at the entrance. And then, a boy, maybe 10, walked past with his mother. He glanced at Darius, hesitated, and said, "Hey, you're the guy who owns this place, right?" Darius smiled gently. "That's me." The boy grinned. "Cool, it's my favorite place." And just like that, he ran off. Darius leaned back, letting the moment settle into his chest like peace. No cameras, no speeches, just a quiet ripple of something greater than pride. He had turned pain into progress, invisibility, into impact, suspicion, into ownership. He had reminded the world that the most powerful thing a black man can do in a space that tries to erase him is stay, and rebuild it. Stronger, fairer, unshakably his.